there is a plethora of different opinions out there, if you will. Donald Trump, of course, saying that this was a comprehensive agreement. And Moon Chung-in, South Korea's national security advisor, saying it seems to be a major beneficiary, South Korea, that is. But I understand that you think that basically this is meaningless. Tell me more.
Well, I don't think it's meaningless. I think that because of the nature of the North Korean political system, a process that was going to resolve the North Korean issue, so to speak, had to start with a meeting of the leaders. That way, the working level people in North Korean government would be empowered to actually get on with negotiating. So you needed Kim Jong Un to get up in public and state the goals that they're working towards. So I think that was good. And I think that we have to reserve judgment. There were meetings, private meetings. We don't know what happened in them. But the written statement itself is vague to the point of being meaningless and doesn't even reach the standards of previous agreements we've had with the North Koreans.
All right. Now, looking ahead, what really needs to happen next, if you can outline, let's say, the next few months, maybe through the end of this year, if you can?
Well, what needs to happen is Secretary of State Pompeo and a counterpart on the North Korean side need to lead delegations in a number of working areas on things like verification, on things like dismantlement, and see how much progress we can make. It may be piecemeal progress. It may be a kind of action for action progress in that they commit to a certain action, and then we make a concession in return. It doesn't have to be a big deal at the same time, but we actually need to see concrete action moving forward.
Marcus, North Korea, as we keep talking about, has had a long history of reneging on its commitments. It hasn't had to really commit to anything, given that, complete, irreversible, verifiable were not words that made it into that communique that was signed. What's the risk? What would you assign as a likelihood that they've gotten what they need out of this, which is international legitimacy?
Well, I think the real risk here is that the maximum pressure campaign, which may have had something to do with bringing them to the bargaining table, is off. You can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. So if we're not able to make progress on any kind of real concrete agreements, whether it be the whole shebang at once or not, the problem for the Trump administration is they're not going to be able to apply economic pressure, and that paradoxically is going to increase the likelihood of military action because they're going to have a lack of policy tools. So on the one hand, the upside is there now. We've got a process going. It was good to have the meeting. It's good that it didn't blow up, but now we actually have to get down to real negotiations over real things, and if we don't, ironically, we may be in a worse situation than we were before this.
Marcus, what do you suppose happens with sanctions now?
Oh, I think the sanctions in a legal sense will probably stay on the books, but it's hard to see China implementing them with any great enthusiasm. And South Korea is probably going to redouble its efforts to figure out ways of engaging with North Korea economically that don't run afoul of these sanctions. So I think the pressure campaign is off. And without that pressure campaign on the economic side, that means if things go badly in terms of the negotiation, ironically, military options are going to be pushed higher on the agenda.
Well, in terms of military options, I thought it was quite interesting that the way that Trump spoke about, removing essentially the U.S. military umbrella across the region, it kind of ties in very nicely with his perceived argument that the U.S. is doing too much of the heavy lifting when it comes to military spending for their allies.
Oh, absolutely. Many people have been very upset by the apparent concession of suspending the joint military exercises with the South Koreans. That doesn't bother me so much because that's easily reversible. What is more bothersome is the fact that he described them as provocative and as war games. That's basically North Korean language. And then used this argument, which he used in his campaign, that the United States was spending too much money. So we're going to, in some sense, reduce our defense or military alliance with South Korea simply because it costs us too much money. That actually is the kind of disturbing detail coming out of this that makes it relatively hard for people like me to remain optimistic that, really, this is still pretty much on track.